Are you seeing it? Oh, there it goes. Welcome, everybody, to another Pico sponsored webinar. Today, we're doing Supercharge Your Factory. We're going to have a discussion on the lean principles and digitization. I'm Bryan Bauw, CEO at Pico, and a recovering industrial engineer. So, lean is close to my heart after spending nearly 20 years helping deploy it in manufacturing. Today, I'm joined with Matthew. Matthew, if you want a quick introduction.
Sure. Matthew Rassi with 20 Helping Hands. My wife and I and 8 children started the business back in 2014. We help companies improve their output without buying more machines or hiring more people using what they have. So I'm excited to dive into how digitization can help companies implement lean.
I'm looking forward to it. And I'll try and keep this to 30 minutes. It is a subject near and dear to my heart and probably could ask lots of topics. For those of you watching along, we will pop up a few questions. There'll be some banners at the bottom. We'd love you to put your answers in the LinkedIn chat and it'll pop over to us. Any questions we have, we'll address at the end and kind of walk through that and any of those other challenges. And then also give us some feedback. We want to do another one of these sessions that might go deeper on any of your specific topics that you want to get into. We'd love to do another follow-up session. So with that, let's dive in. And for me, lean does come back to kind of how we are working through a number of continuous improvement goals. But here you've broken it down into 5 kind of major steps that people are looking at and what they're trying to engage with. Matthew, walk us through some of this and where your thinking goes with this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's many aspects to lean manufacturing, but the goal is daily continuous improvement. We're also looking for the goal being flow. So most people think that if we all just give our best, that will get us our best output, but that's not actually true. If the fastest person gets faster, we do not necessarily get more throughput. So we've got to find the bottlenecks and we've got to work on flow. So the goal of continuous improvement and lean manufacturing is flow. That works by engaging our operators and giving them the tools and equipping them so that they can be effective in what they do, not just working in the business with their hands, but also working on the business with improvements. This is where they become a self-directed and empowered workforce because we are providing the resources, the training, and the time for them to be able to work on the business. That allows us to continue to grow. And of course, the goal of most businesses is to be able to grow, either to grow the output or to grow as a business in what they are making and how they are performing.
Double click on flow. What does flow mean to you, and how would you define that for some of those folks that are newer to lean?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to use the example. If I was able to drive my rich uncle's sports car, it looks so fun. All right, I get out on the highway and I go flying, and then I have to slow down and go around a car, and then I go flying and I have to slow down and go around a car, or I get in the family van and I'm just going with the flow of traffic. Right? Which one's going to get better gas mileage? Right? And this flow in a factory, it works the same way. So wherever you see piles, you've got problems. So we want to avoid the piles. We want to keep things from sitting for longer than 24 hours or even less in some situations. And the goal is that we flow. And the better flow that we have, the more efficient, think less dollars spent we will be.
Yeah, you're only as fast as your slowest or process, or what they call a bottleneck in many ways, and then kind of working that through. I love that analogy with the cars. I do find that on the way to driving my son to school every morning, you get that one person that's always trying to race the light and you always catch them up at the next one. It's kind of amusing. So it's the same concept. It's a really good analogy to work that through. Dive a little bit more why you've got engaging with the operator on 2 of these bubbles and why that's so important to lean also.
Yeah, many people think that continuous improvement can be delegated to some department, like a continuous improvement department. But if you try to delegate quality, safety, continuous improvement, and there's a number of other things that simply don't work, or you don't get as much as you can unless you engage the entire team. And so lean is big about the 2-second improvements, being able to spend time working on the business and engaging our team to do it. Why is this important? It's because they do it every day. They know what bugs them. They know what is not working. And they have, surprisingly, tons of ideas of how to make it better. But we either are not listening, have not listened in the past, or are not equipping them to actually be able to help make these things happen.
I love that description. One of the first factories I ran, we broke our kind of continuous improvement targets into like the big ones that needed an ROI calculation, the quick hits that were going to show good return in a meeting. And then the third one we called, they were effectively the frustrations in the line. And a lot of times dealing just with those frustrations ended up unlocking some of those other bigger projects anyway. And so just by engaging those operators and removing their day-to-day bugbears and the things that they found frustrating, they really leaned in and bought into the culture of that continuous improvement. And by the end of a year of running continuous improvement, we were actually outpacing both our upstream and downstream value stream. So it's really important to engage those operators on that end. And then talk me through the facilitate growth, because that's the one where everybody lands the plane, and how you continue to do continuous improvement, how you maintain that culture going forward. What does facilitate growth mean?
Yeah, it really takes a change in mindset, because most people's mindset is, when they're thinking about growth, is that I'm going to need to add so many people. I was just visiting with a place that's a 3D printing house. They had 10 folks, and they're like, I think by the end of the year, we're going to have 16. That's the growth pattern we're on. But they're just thinking they're going to get the growth by adding people, right? We don't just need to add people or add more machines. We can actually scale with what we have if we use our resources better. What if they could get that same growth only going from 10 people to 13 people? What I found in my experience is that just adding people adds more chaos. It does not reduce it.
More chaos for sure.
Adding more people is not going to be your solution to reducing chaos. So really focusing on, how is our process functioning, and are we using standard work? And I often ask this question about standard work, and we're going to be getting to that shortly, but I will ask individuals if they have standard work, or a company if they have standard work. Yeah, we know what to do. Well, is it written down? If it's not written
dusty
down,
book somewhere on a shelf somebody hasn't read in a year.
Exactly.
On the way past. Well, with that, let's jump to the next slide and talk a little bit about some of the principles to apply to manufacturing, some of the key aspects thereof. Walk us through these three ones.
Sure. So let's start with the one in the middle there, the standardized work. So standardized work should be at a level that anybody can come up and be able to do this task in a short period of time. So we need things like job aids. So I want you to take the example of when I take my child to the bowling alley, and they come to the bowling alley. They never bowled before, but I want them to be successful. So what do? We put bumpers. These are like the guidelines to help them be successful. And so at least they hit some pins and they don't get all gutter balls. But imagine if I were to take those bumpers and narrow it down so we always hit the front pin. Now, if I have good standard work and I have good job aids, my crews will be like that bowler, where I can get it so they hit the front pin every time. I may not get a perfect strike every time, but they can be more successful, versus some of the time they get gutter balls. They don't get it in there until they're really, really good. So the standardized work is what allows us to be more successful. And without standardized work, companies really suffer, and employees get very frustrated because the verbal descriptions do not work. The work instructions that are off in some cabinet do not work because nobody looks at them, or they can't read it, or it's in the wrong language. These are common challenges that every company has.
Yeah, I talked to Rebecca Resnick a couple of months ago about creating good work instructions, and she was pretty blunt about it the same way. Like, just keep it simple, keep it direct, work your way through that. We got a webinar on that. People want to go back to that. But yeah, it's important to create really good standard work, and it isn't actually as hard as some people think it is, because it actually is to the point. Keeping it simple is often the first part of that. Walk us through some of the other ones that are on here.
Sure. So let's talk about continuous improvement. So you talked before about the various levels, and we call them level 1, level 2, level 3 of ideas that are shared for improvement, and recognizing and empowering our team that for a level 1 improvement, this is something that you can do yourself. A level 2, we might need some resources or some approval, and level 3s are complicated. This is where we need things like a Kaizen event, or do the 5 whys to really get down and figure out what is causing our problems. But the point is that I need the daily little improvements to keep going. And I also need the Kaizen type improvemements, where we make a stepped up improvement, but realize that all of our competition is also improving. And so just with my step ups, it's not enough. And just with little continuous improvement, it's not enough. And I can tell you, if you're not doing any of these activities in continuous improvement right now, that your business is going down relative to everybody else. So you can't just stand still.
Give us an example of a Kaizen that you've done recently with one of your clients that had good impact and stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. So on our wire EDMs, we were really struggling with the amount of uptime that we had on the machines. These are machines that you can push a button and walk away if you have everything set up. And it was a multi-shift operation. They were looking to do to keep their machines running more effectively. They were somewhere in the 60% range. And by addressing some of their needs, so we came in with it. This was just a couple of hour Kaizen event. Where are we at today? What would it take for us to get up to that 80% range of output? And we came up with a number of core things. They did not have enough fixtures of types, so they were always waiting for a job to get done to be able to switch out the fixtures. We had training that we needed to do for our second and third shifts so that they could maintain and keep the wires going when they broke. We had opportunities for the weekend runs to make sure that we had set up what needed to be on there. And as they implemented these changes, some of them that we did right there at the time, others we had to order and get those fixtures in and be able to implement these. And we go from 60% to 80%, right? Other options would have been to get another machine, try to hire more people on the off shifts. It's very possible you can make the improvements with what you currently have.
How did the team feel after they made that improvement?
They were listened to. They were listened to. They were engaged.
Yeah.
They were no longer frustrated. They were the ones that were so frustrated because they wanted to have better numbers, but they didn't have
for sure.
They didn't have enough training. The off-shift operators would be like, I came in, I couldn't get this thing to go. Then he comes in here and in 2 seconds, he gets it up. How does he do that, right? Well, let's share it. Let's make
Someone
sure.
teach me. Yeah, fair. Last one before we jump over to our quick question about eliminating waste. But while we're talking about eliminating waste, tell us how you're engaging with your employees. What kind of standard work do you have? Put some comments in the LinkedIn so we have some context of where you all are at. While we're waiting for some of those answers, Matthew, walk us through eliminating waste and why that's kind of the fundamental principle behind lean and why everybody talks about waste in lean.
Absolutely. So what we're looking to do is add value to our customer. And many of the things that we do every day are not adding value, and that is waste. So whether it is waiting or movement or transportation or defects or all these types of things. And I will tell you that waste can be very frustrating. And in most plants, the amount of value add is a very thin sliver. If we were to look at a whole pie as our time, a very thin sliver is our value add, maybe 10%. And you can tell this because most places have a lead time of a week, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, but the amount of machine time is measured in hours. So my value add is just a thin sliver, and I got all this waste. So by being able to identify and see what the waste is, as we move forward and utilize tools and engage our team, we are able to find ways to reduce that waste and recognize this is not adding value. And this is where those small improvements every day can make a difference. The few steps that I have to take, or the defects where I do this and I still get 2 out of 10 are bad. What can we do to adjust it so I don't get those 2 out of 10 and fix it right at the source instead of how do I more efficiently do my rework? That is not adding value. And then, of course, inventory is massive. People are overproducing. They'll get an order for 100 pieces. They're going to get in material so they can make 120. They process 120 at the first step, and then they have 116 at the second op, and then they have 110 at the third op, and it works its way down there, but they still end up with 105 at the end. They've added all this extra value to things that no one's going to pay for, or you have a certain percentage that you can ship, and then people try to go over that. The overproduction is deadly, and we're doing it in batches. So if we have a problem, that entire batch is bad, right? This is why we end up going for one-piece flow. So eliminating waste and being aware of waste is super critical. I did experience in my career where I used to go after waste, and it's very anti-intuitive. It's very hard to say, yeah, but we have defects, so we have to fix them. I have to take this many steps, or that guy's got to take that many steps, right? So I can't get rid of these things. So just trying to eliminate waste, I have found not to be effective with teams. They need to be aware of the waste, but then we have other tools that we can use specifically at the bottleneck. Remember, we need to focus on where our slowest area is and get them resources to eliminate that waste and add more value.
I love this discussion. In fact, slightly tangentially, one of my very early lessons in waste from one of my first managers on the shop floor was, as a operations manager, my job actually technically was 100% waste. I was adding no value to the product. So every time I got in the way of an operator, I was actually causing more waste on the way past. So his whole thesis was manage yourself out of a job. So always figure out how to help the operator be more efficient. Obviously you'll have a job more on because you're effectively creating more efficiency as you go along, but his point was very valid of like most of the things you think you're doing are adding value, the customer's not going to see as that value at the end of the day. They're just going to want to know how fast they can get their product in the condition in which they ordered it. Yeah, I love that. Well, appreciate everybody popping. We've got a couple comments here about where they're currently doing with some of the standard work, SOPs, visual displays, trading, jobs, cycle checks. I love all of that. It's all very pertinent, very relevant to doing a lot of standard work. Particularly diving in on some of the SOPs while you're here at Pico, we are very passionate about creating very robust SOPs that are only through. What's kind of some of your standardized tools that you'd look at, Matthew?
Yeah, we like to talk a lot about job aids. So instead of this work instruction that's pages and pages long, I want to break it down to the smallest tasks. So let's go back to Henry Ford. When he was making cars, he realized he could not hire enough mechanics. This is the problem that almost every shop tells me. I can't get enough guys that know
100 years later, we're still there.
Yeah. So he can't get enough mechanics, so he hires a guy like me, and the only thing I know how to do is put on a tire. That's fine. I got 4 tires to put on. But then he goes, it's not fast enough. Now we're making a car every 10 minutes. I want a car every 5 minutes. So I hire another guy. He does 2 tires. I do 2 tires. Then I want to go faster. So I get down to all I'm doing is putting on 2 nuts or 3 nuts. And the next guy puts on 2 nuts and checks them, right? If there's 5 nuts for the tire. Now that is where I want my job aids, is all the way down at how do you properly apply the nuts so that you're successful. And the problem with most work instructions is we try to say, here's how you build a car. And that's just way too much. You got to really narrow it down to your standard work into very small steps. And now if there's 8 steps to be able to effectively put on a tire or something like that, then I can divide those steps between different people because I've defined what those steps are. And so this is how you get to be successful, whether it's in assembly or on a machine. What does it take to do a changeover? Don't have a work instruction for the entire changeover. Start with something small of how do we change out a tool? Let's make sure that we all change tools exactly the same and touch them off the same. Okay, now we go to the next step and doing those job aids. 3 pictures, a little verbiage, and sometimes on the back, we'll put, be careful for these things because there are things that can trip folks up. And if you don't have that included in your job aid, people are going to keep making the same mistakes.
100%. And that's exactly why we're here. So when you take those job aids and you simplify them down to their kind of the most basic form, and then you put them in a digital tool, which is kind of why we're here to talk about how lean and digital work together, we're leading right into where the next. So let's talk about how we kind of digitize manufacturing facilities and where it really starts with actually what you were just talking about. I wish it had actually been so well organized that was how this was supposed to prompt, but it did prompt it that way. Is when you're talking about digitizing work instructions and that standard, is enabling the operator feedback is also a key part of that process. So in my world, whether it's now or whether it's 20 years ago, work instructions were always meant to be self-healing. So people were always supposed to be able to give feedback. We used to do it through suggestion boxes. We had one point where we used to draw it on a giant whiteboard wall. Walk us through some of your thoughts on how the process goes with digitization and where it starts here at digital instructions.
Yes, so I always like to start out, we're going to be doing it, quote, by hand or just with a normal document that we're going to do because we're going to do some pilot areas and see how this goes. So this is part of the overwhelm of standard work. Like we can't possibly do everything, nor do you need to. Figure out where your bottleneck is, take a very narrow slice. Let's get started with where we're at. Right. And so we're going to start in just one area. We're going to get our pictures. We're going to get our verbiage. We're going to start to build this up. But as you start to do that, it becomes very unwieldy if you're keeping it in the paper or trying to do it all on a whiteboard. So there is only one way to scale your standard work, and that is to get it digitized with easy access. And whether it's going to be tablets on the line or computer screens right there, you need to have something that they can easily access, not password protected, all these types of things so that they can get into it. And then not only can it show them the information, but they can make notes, drawings, suggest changes that need to happen on the fly as they're doing it. This is not working. It doesn't work for this. It works for this. Those types of things. That is how you're going to get a scalable and sustainable solution. So many people are resistant to going digital. And at the very beginning, hey, you don't necessarily need digital. But as you start to scale, as you start to spread this across further operations, after you've got your initial bottleneck area done, that's about the only way you can do it and keep it in a sustainable level, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. And the work instruction is the first point of call for the operator to engage with. And then we get into the next kind of couple of things here about connecting tools. I mean, 20 years ago, I've seen some videos of people doing some of these connected tools, and they had a lot of effort to do it. Still had impressive result. Now that it's become more commoditized, it actually should be a part of the toolkit is people going through that kind of 5S process of how do you actually error proof it. And so walk us through some of your other thoughts here on where we go with the next steps of digitization and lean.
Sure. So the connected tools is not just with an actual tool, as in a gun and those types of things. Now you have measuring tools that are Bluetooth enabled that I can get my measurements and be able to tie them directly to serial number specific if needed. In the medical field, this is important. In the food industry, this is important. So these types of things that instead of people trying to scan and do all these types of things, it's right there. It's already all connected. The third one that I really like is that real-time data, right? I need the immediate feedback of how I am doing so that I can tell. And so finding ways that people can have green, red boards or their measurements or their time frame, their tax sheets of hour by hour or even tighter than that, and being able to enter that information. These are the types of things that we can do them on whiteboards. They can be very helpful, especially initially. But as I get further, I need the historical data, which is hard to capture on a whiteboard unless you're taking snapshots. Right. And so I can actually use the digital where I can see it both. It's displayed. I have the historical and I can see the adjustments or the reasons why. Super simple. I've got a drop down of the 10 reasons we might have had an issue. The operator just clicks which one it is. Now I have that data as well. So I can bring other resources to the cell to help them improve. Remember, here we are not measuring the person. We are measuring the process. And so we need to get the resources to the process that are going to make us more successful.
The number of Kaizen events I've had stall or not have the impact they should have because we didn't have the data to go get after. I mean, you have a week-long Kaizen, you spend the first 2 to 3 days trying to collect the data. If you've got it readily available, you're actually making the Kaizen itself more efficient, which is just an awesome thing to be able to say. And then you can get on to some of the more advanced stuff here about change management happens through automated processing. So you actually have control of your process. You notify operators on the way through. And then automating that traceability so you can actually see, did your Kaizen have a real impact on the way past? I mean, what are some of your thoughts on the kind of tail end of a Kaizen and how you actually make sure it's stuck?
Yeah, so I want to clarify. We have Kaizen event, right, which is going to be a larger group that's tackling our level 3 problems, and then we have Kaizen, which is our daily approach to making continuous improvement. And I need both of those things. One of the key areas that you can be really effective in this, especially if your team is starting at zero and needs to get off of the line, and that is to begin working on ideas and sharing ideas. The beautiful thing with ideas is that they build on each other. And so if the original idea is never expressed, we don't get up to that third or fourth level of, this doesn't quite work, but maybe we can do it like this. So facilitating ideas, specifically in huddles, where I am both sharing, here's what's going on, and I want to garner information from my team. And again, the more information that we share, the better our team's going to do. Recognize how many decisions your team is making every day. The more information they have, the more successful they're going to be. So unless you have a way to be sharing information on a daily basis, your team is missing out and making decisions that are ill-informed. And so we want to be able to empower them so they can make better decisions. And we want their ideas coming in. You don't have to do every idea, but you need to acknowledge every idea and then pick the best ones as a group and go
and show people where they're at. 100% with that.
Yep.
I agree. Well, what are some of the easy ways to get started? Let's walk through our last slide here and then take some questions.
Absolutely. So the first thing is that we want to be figuring out where's our bottleneck and where we want to focus. Okay. And then we're going to take a small area and we're going to focus in that area and do a pilot. We're going to work on standard work. We're going to engage our team so that they're aware of what lean is, what waste is, how we need to be able to get more out. This is a matter of drawing resources to our problem area and helping it. In some cases, folks know what their problem area is, and in other places they don't. So we want to be able to pull these things together. We want to see what are our top 3 quality issues. As an organization or as a work center, These should be posted. Everybody in the team should know these are our top 3 quality issues. Just that awareness will cut your quality issues in half in most cases. But these visual systems are really critical.
Get a little Hawthorne effect in there where, once something is measured and visible, people actually know they need to go after it. It's the old kind of keeping a scoreboard in front of folks so they know where they're at. I love it. And just to put a little Pico over the top, and why I love the digital lean conversation is because from our point of view, digitization shouldn't be hard. And when you're going out and doing these Kaizen events, there's a lot of importance on trying to get to simple solutions as quickly as possible so that the Kaizen doesn't lose momentum. So like our no code tool integration library came very much right out of that thought. Instead of running out and trying to get a controls engineer to come over and program a new tool. So if you're, to your point a minute ago, if you're trying to get a new measurement taken, go get the Bluetooth tool, plug it in, turn it on, connect it to the software, and now start measuring instead of doing the cycle of it's going to take somebody a week to go read how you actually integrate that to whatever system to collect the data. Or worse yet, you go get the tool and then someone starts writing it into Excel or on a piece of paper. I used to have a whole pile of paper at one of my jobs from people taking measurements we never got back to. And just trying to do that kind of simple integration and leading that forward. And that's why it's really interesting to see where digital has gone with the simplification of it and the commoditization of it, so that lean is really enabled to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, the plug and play is fantastic for being able to get things off and rolling.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Whereas, well, that was a quick fly through of lean and digital. We'd love to go deeper, and we'd love to take some more questions from y'all on where you actually think digital and lean could go. Maybe do some more advanced topics within it. This was a bit of a precursor to somewhere that could go. So we'd love to get y'all's questions, your feedback in the LinkedIn chat here, and ask us some questions. We'll take some questions now. But for next steps, for those of you that are interested in kind of doing some digital lean, we've got some free tools. Pico offers up its work instructions for free. You can go access that from any browser online, free, no strings attached. Just, well, you get an email, so you can log in. But other than that, and then you can also go through a whole bunch of tours. Got lots of content on there. And then also reach out to Matthew. He's really keen to help folks move in this space, particularly the small and medium folks. To access some of this. And then also his free lean starter guidebook is available. So if you want to go access that, it's in the link. Drop in, you'll see that there. But for now, throw us some questions. Where are you at in your digital journey? What do you see? What are some of the challenges you want us to talk about? What do you want us to think about? Go on, throw those in the comments in the LinkedIn. We'll start popping up some questions here. How can I create small deployments to improve impact? That couldn't get to be any more of a lean question if it tried. Do you want to take that one, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about it throughout this of having pilots and proof of concept areas. Don't try to tackle the entire factory at one time. Let's get a small group and prove that it really has impact, get some quick wins. This is common to any change management type efforts, but particularly with lean and the opportunity there to really focus in on where the bottleneck is. Because the beauty is, as you improve the bottleneck, the flow through the organization improves and you get the increased throughput immediately. The rest of the team can see that and say, I want that for my area. This is why events such as 5S and Kaizen events can be so have such an impact, is because you can pick a small area and people can see what a difference it can make in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried to deploy an MES. It was about 15 years ago, and we tried to go across the whole 100,000 square foot, 100+ person facility. I spent more time trying to fix the MES than actually getting the MES to tell me what to do with my shop floor. Yeah. So if you try and boil the ocean all at the same time, you're going to drown on the way past. How do I create a digital twin of my existing processes? From a Pico point of view, it's quite simple. You go in, you effectively take and do what we would call a value stream map at a top level, identify the key cells, and then drop them in and build the work instructions that kind of parse along with it. Matthew, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, when we approach a house of lean and the tools that we're going to use, the first thing we need to do is that value stream map. Walk through the process from the supplier to the first operation, second operation, third operation to the shipment. And believe me, I hear it from every shop. They're like, yeah, if we made the same thing all the time, we could do that. But we're looking at processes here. You got to step back to the 30,000 foot level and see that most of the products that you produce are following the similar process steps. And so they may skip some, they may be a little bit different, but we need to follow that process step through and see where is our bottleneck. And that's from the visual of the handwritten and making yourself a value stream map. But if you really want to see what's going on, we got to go to the floor. We got to do that Gemba walk. We need to see where things are at. Look for the piles as we recognize and see how our processes are set up. Getting that into a digital twin, a value stream map, so that we can build out our digitization tools that we're going to use to support our team.
Value stream mapping was always one of my favorite exercises, because you actually get to see, come back to your very earliest comment of this whole thing, is you actually got to see where the flow should be and how the flow should be, because it kind of, you did the current state and the future state, and you actually kind of idealized what your shop floor would look like. And you can do that same thing through a digital twin, and it gives you the ability to effectively move around and drag and drop things. So again, talking about just iterating on that continuous improvement a lot faster with the digital tool, as opposed to, well, we used to move Post-its and then tape them up because they always fell off on the way past. But it gives you that kind of opportunity to modernize and do your value stream mapping right up front on the way past. If you'd like to have a deeper discussion on lean or digital, feel free to reach out. Put any more questions you have into the comments. We'll address them either here, or we'll reach out directly with any answers that we can come along. I think that's the end of our session. Well, we might have gone, how can MES help with the right sizing width between operations and one-piece flow is not practical? I want to answer that one, because that one's a really interesting one before we get off here. So the question was, how can MES help with right sizing width between operations when one piece flow is not practical? Do you want to take this one first, Matthew?
Well, my concept also is very much along the concept that not one piece does not always mean one piece. It may be a set that we may be able to move through, but I need to be able to have enough to be able to support my bottleneck operation again. So maybe a drum buffer rope type concept. We don't have time to go into that now, but I need to have enough there so that my bottleneck is not sitting idle as it moves forward. One piece flow is not practical in every operation, but in most cases, the huge batches that we're doing are only overproducing. So we do want to right size and work our way down. What are your thoughts on that, Bryan?
I love right where you're going. So that book, The Goal, which is actually referenced by almost any lean person, talks about the bottleneck. And when you start talking about right sizing WIP, so where an MES comes in, particularly one that can give you instant feedback, what we talked a couple of slides ago, if you understand the actual takt time and the actual cycle times of each of those, and you know that one place is causing that bottleneck, so creating too much WIP, you can then go in with your next Kaizen, as an example, and go and try and tackle that. So if you have a pace of 1.1, 1.5, 1.1, you know you need to drop in on that 1.5 and see if there's something you can either do to split that into maybe 2.75s, or a 1 and a 1.5 or 0.5, or is there something you actually can do to remove some waste from that process so you create the ones all across the board, as a very simple example. And an MES effectively gives you the data and the capability to go in and do that very robustly and very quickly. And also one that has the ability for the operators to give two-way feedback, is they can go in and challenge the work instructions or the SOPs and say, this is where I'm seeing you're making me walk from point A to point B. That's taking the 0.5 seconds. Maybe that's the idea, to remove that and bring the parts closer, as an example, so you reduce travel time. So you're tackling many of those wastes. So the MES has the opportunity to open a lot of doors around kind of right sizing WIP, as an example.
I love that, because it gives you the data and the information to be able to do your line balancing. But too many people just go into line balancing and try to move the numbers around. If you hit the nail on the head, if we can reduce some waste in some of those areas that are getting us out of balance, then we may be able to get balance without having to just shuffle around wasteful tasks.
Yeah, exactly. That was always my philosophy, is if I had a bottleneck, why would I try and shuffle things to manage the bottleneck when I should actually be trying to address the bottleneck? And I know that's not possible in all examples, and sometimes you even need to short-term do that. And so the MES can help you kind of look to see where your WIP is stacking on the way too. So there's that opportunity. Appreciate the question. It's a really good question. I think that's all we have time for now. So I appreciate everybody joining us today. Again, feel free to reach out to Matthew or I. We're available on LinkedIn. You have Matthew's email there. You can reach me at brian@picomes.com. Would love to continue this conversation. You'll probably hear more from us when we come up with another topic in and around the lean world on this, and probably dive deeper, maybe value stream mapping, and go in from there. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us through this conversation. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. A great foundation, I think, was laid today. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.